welcome to my channel. If you are celebrating the Lunar New Year, I wish you and your family and your loved ones a wonderful new year ahead. So for this year, it will be the year of the snake, and specifically the year of the wooden snake. So here I have done an illustration which is the Lord of the Snake. So without further ado, let's get started.
Hello. So as I was editing this video, I realized that some of the segments where I did my voice recording did not go through. So I'm having flu right now, so that's the reason why my voice sounds slightly different. But I hope nonetheless you'll be able to understand what I'm saying. So since this is a larger art piece where I worked on A3 watercolor paper, with a large surface area for painting, I was thinking of whether to use Holbein Acryl Gouache or the Turner Acryl Gouache, and in the end I chose Turner Acryl Gouache because for a larger piece like this and the way that I work with my acrylic gouaches, I usually paint with light layers, and then in the end I'll be using opaque layers on top. And usually when I'm painting, I constantly change my mind about the colors that I would like to use for the final layers. So this helps, because for Turner Acryl Gouache, no matter how diluted I make my layers, my initial layers, they are still slightly somewhat opaque and smooth looking, and by the time I add on the opaque layers on top, the color payoff is still very good, and overall the smooth matte effect that we see and love for gouache paint, it comes true. I usually tend to use Holbein Acryl Gouache like a traditional gouache, where I do not do multiple layers. There's just a bit of shading and that's it. Not really a lot of light layers and then opaque layers. Like for this painting, you can see that I constantly kept changing the robe that the Lord of the Snakes was wearing. Initially I wanted it to have multiple pleats, so I had drawn in the pleats first, so that when I do another light layer on top, the pleats would still come through, and at the same time the color that's on top will be slightly darker than the color that I lay down for the pleats. So this kind of effect I'm able to achieve with the Turner Acryl Gouache. But for the Holbein Acryl Gouache, if I were to try this right, especially if I were to do multiple layers, what happens is the paint becomes somewhat rough, where the final layer will not be a smooth flat layer, but instead there'll be like speckles of dots. And if I were to go back and forth with my paintbrush to smoothen out that layer, I would actually end up ripping the paper, or worse, making the surface area even rougher than before. So considering all this in mind, since I was working with the A3 sized paper, I decided to go with the Turner Acryl Gouache. Now, Holbein Acryl Gouache does have its strengths. I am not saying that it doesn't have its own strengths, but for this particular illustration, since I felt more comfortable using the Turner Acryl Gouache, I decided to use this. So that's the main reason why I decided to use this brand of acrylic gouache other than Holbein, because it really boiled down to the way that I do my paintings, where I do multiple layers, multiple light translucent layers, where I build up the opacity as the layers go on. And as you can see here, it really doesn't affect the final outcome of the illustration. The paper still withstands so many layers, and I didn't even need to do scrubbing to ensure that the layer is smooth and flat. Coming back to the Lord of the Snakes robe, in the end I decided that the focus should be on his face, and then followed by the snake that he was holding in his hands. So because of that, I made the snake more colorful, so that the attention will definitely be there. And I decided that, okay, let me just make his robe as simple as possible, without lots of details, because if I were to add lots of details, I guess the snake would not stand out. since he's holding it against his robe, and that's the reason why I made his robe a bit darker. Initially I wanted to play around with the colors and see whether should I add light pink or light purple just to soften his look. But as I added on the layers, I decided that it's better to have his robe in a dark color. So in the end I mixed a deep magenta red, and the color payoff was such that it appeared like a dark wine red, and it suited him perfectly, and it served also as a good backdrop for the snake that he was holding. For the color choices for this illustration, I am someone who definitely loves working with colors, so I decided to add a bit of pops of color in this illustration, and that is why you will be able to see the bright pops of teal. And initially there was supposed to be pink, that's for his robe that you will be seeing now. So instead of having teal as well as the bright pink, in the end only teal was the bright pop of color, and the rest are more, I would say, muted, but they're more suitable for this night scene that we are able to see. For the moon, I was thinking of first painting it as a very pale whitish yellow. Then I was thinking about, or should I just paint it as a light pale blue and extremely whitish blue. But with my scrap paper I tried that out, and what I realized was, by having those colors, either a very pale yellow or a very pale blue as the moon that is actually directly behind the lord of the snake's head, his face did not really when I tested out both colors, the whitish pale blue as well as the whitish pale yellow, and when I compared that with having the lord of the snake's head in front of the moon, as in he's standing in front of the moon, his face was no longer the focus of the attention. Leaving it as stark white also showed that despite being a brilliant moonlit night, this lord of the snakes here, he appeared a bit dark. So I want to add that element there of a dark, brooding lord of the snakes. So that's why, although he has like a pleasant expression on his face, he's not exactly smiling wide, although he's holding his pet snake in his hands. And at the same time, I also wanted to add on elements of mystery to him, and that is why you would see me again working on his hair as well as his eyes at the end of this illustration. Now, don't get me wrong, I love using Holbein Acrylic Gouache as well. It has a beautiful color selection. But for that paint, when I'm going to use it, usually I will just stick with the same tubes of paint, as in I will not add in other brands of gouache while I'm working with Holbein Acrylic Gouache, because at the end of the day, by the time I finish the illustration, if I were to just stick with Holbein Acrylic Gouache paints, the color payoff is much smoother, beautiful and vibrant. But for this illustration piece, since I'm working on a A3 sized paper, and it also boils down to your working style. Like both brands have an excellent, beautiful selection of colors, but due to my working style of working with multiple light layers, I decided to go with Turner Acryl Gouache. So please don't take this video as me bashing Holbein Acrylic Gouache. Holbein Acrylic Gouache does have its strengths. When I'm working on a separate piece later where I am just using Holbein Acrylic Gouache, then I'll be able to show you through the illustration on the beauty and the pros of using Holbein Acrylic Gouache. Now, back to our painting. So this is the final look, the finished illustration. I decided to cut away the edges of the painting because when I was ripping out one of the masking tapes, there were two sides that were smudged despite having the tape bound tightly on the papers, so that can't be helped. So I had used my guillotine paper cutter. So if you have been watching this video till the end, thank you so much for your support. Do remember to subscribe, comment, like this video so that it can reach more people who enjoy watching illustrations done in gouache or acrylic gouache. Thank you. See you again in my next video. Bye.